When humans crash an auction selling alien women into forced marriage, only the Corsair's guns dare answer a virgin's desperate prayer. The Talarian girl begged for salvation with eyes full of fear and sorrow, but the bidders, rich alien scum in corporate suits, only saw her as a prize to claim. On Zephyrus Prime, an outlaw colony choking under the boot of corporate greed, everything and everyone had a price tag. The girl's own father dragged her on stage flanked by armed guards. No one gave a damn about her tears or impending doom. No one except Captain Stephen's stray dog Hunter and his crew of Crimson Corsairs. Infiltrating the auction house for a clandestine heist, their plans shifted gears when Stephen witnessed the girl's plight. Something in her struck a chord, echoing humanity's own struggles in this fucked-up galaxy. "Stealth mission be damned," he signaled his crew. They were saving this girl, even if it meant burning the whole place down. Smoke bombs and flash grenades ignited the air as bidders screamed and scattered. Under the cover of chaos, Stephen charged through plasma bolts and panicked bodies, a man on a mission. He decked the leering warlord set to claim the girl just as her scumbag father handed her over. As the creep crashed through priceless shelves, Stephen locked eyes with the terrified beauty. In that charged moment, a silent promise passed between them. "Follow me if you want to live." She hesitated only a heartbeat before taking his hand, sealing her fate with the brazen humans who dared to defy this messed-up status quo. As guards and alien goons poured in with lasers blazing, the Corsairs fought, shot, and blasted their way out with their precious cargo in tow. The Talarian girl clung to Stephen, a wide-eyed refugee in a tempest of destruction. When the Crimson Corsair's ship, the Andromeda's Gambit, pierced the heavens fleeing Zephyrus Prime, Stephen knew two immutable truths. One, they just made dangerous enemies that would never stop hunting them. Two, he'd go to war with the whole damn galaxy to protect this girl who dared to hope for more than the chains they put on her. She was his responsibility now, his revolution, his redemption. In a universe ruled by corruption and exploitation, the lustful and fierce human spirit might be the only light in the darkness. Stray Dog and his pack of rogues will take on alien warlords, planetary corporations, and the cruel fates themselves to give one Talarian maiden a chance to live free. The mighty may fall, and the wicked will burn. Only the bold humans have the balls to fight for what's right in a galaxy gone wrong. The Andromeda's Gambit tore through the shimmering veil of hyperspace, stars blurring into streaks of light beyond the viewport. In the ship's cramped mess hall, Captain Stephen Hunter gathered his crew for an impromptu meeting. He leaned against the battered table, his rugged features bathed in the harsh glow of overhead lights. "Listen up, Corsairs," Stephen said, his voice low and urgent. "We need to lay low while the heat dies down. Jet, set course for Tartarus Station in the Maelstrom Nebula. It's a lawless shithole, but it's our best bet for now." Jarek Jet Hawkins, the grizzled pilot, nodded grimly. "Aye, Captain. I'll plot the jump. We should reach Tartarus in about 12 hours. As the crew dispersed to their duties, Stephen turned his attention to Fornax. The Talarian girl stood uncertainly in the corner, her eyes wide and wary. He approached her slowly, his hands held out in a placating gesture. "Hey, you doing okay?" he asked softly. "I know this is all a lot to take in." Fornax met his gaze, her voice barely above a whisper. I don't know what to think. Everything's happening so fast." Stephen nodded, understanding in his eyes. "Come on, let me show you around the ship. Introduce you to the crew. They're a rough bunch, but they've got hearts of gold." As they walked the narrow corridors of the Andromeda's Gambit, Stephen pointed out the various compartments and systems. In the armory, they encountered Gideon Gator Blay, the burly weapons specialist. He looked up from the plasma rifle he was cleaning, a crooked grin splitting his bearded face. Well, look what the captain dragged in," Gator chuckled. "Welcome aboard, little lady. If you ever need someone to teach you how to shoot straight, I'm your man." Fornax managed a weak smile, overwhelmed by Gator's boisterous presence. Stephen steered her onwards, towards the medbay. There they found Orion Doc Stark, the ship's medic, hunched over a microscope. He glanced up as they entered, his gentle eyes crinkling at the corners. "Ah, you must be our new guest," Doc said warmly. "If you ever need medical attention or just someone to talk to, My door is always open. Fornax nodded gratefully, touched by the medic's kindness. As they moved on, Stephen led her to the cluttered workshop, where Lynx, the enigmatic hacker, was engrossed in a tangle of wires and circuit boards. The young woman barely acknowledged their presence, her gaze flickering briefly to Fornax before returning to her work. "Don't mind Lynx," Stephen said as they left the workshop. "She's not much for small talk, but she's a genius with computers. Saved our asses more times than I can count." Hours later, as Tartarus Station loomed in the view screen, Stephen gathered the crew once more. The decrepit space station hung in the void like a rusted behemoth, its hull pockmarked with scars and makeshift repairs. "All right, listen up," Stephen said, his tone grave. "Tartarus is a hive of scum and villainy. We need to resupply, gather intel, and find a way to throw that warlord bastard off our scent. We'll split into teams. Gator, you and Jet hit the markets. See what gear and supplies you can rustle up. Doc, you're on medical duty. Stock up on whatever we need. Lynx, do what you do best. Slice into the station systems. See if you can pick up any chatter about us or our pursuers." He turned to Fornax, his expression softening. "You're with me, kid. We're going to pay a visit to an old friend of mine, an information broker named Zephyr. If anyone can help us stay one step ahead, it's him." As the crew split off to their assigned tasks, Stephen led Fornax into the seedy underbelly of Tartarus Station. They navigated the neon-lit alleys and smoke-filled bazaars, the air thick with the stench of sweat and desperation. Eyes followed them from shadowed corners, hungry gazes assessing their worth. In a dimly lit bar, they finally located Zephyr. The sleek Felixian lounged in a booth, his feline eyes glinting with amusement as Stephen approached. "Well, well, if it isn't the infamous stray dog," Zephyr purred, his voice like silk over steel. "And who's this lovely creature you've brought with you?" Stephen ignored the broker's oily charm, cutting straight to the point. "We need information, Zephyr, and we need it fast. You help us, and I'll make it worth your while." Zephyr leaned back, a calculating smile playing across his lips. "Of course, my friend, but information is a precious commodity. If you want what I know, you'll have to do a little job for me first." As the Felixian outlined his terms, Stephen felt a sinking feeling in his gut. A high-stakes poker game, a notorious crime lord, a valuable data drive. It was a risky gambit, but what choice did they have? He glanced at Fornax, seeing the dedication in her eyes. She gave him a small nod, a silent affirmation of trust. In that moment, Stephen knew he would do whatever it took to keep her safe, to give her the freedom she deserved, even if it meant taking on the whole damn galaxy. The neon-drenched corridors of Tartarus Station faded into the rear view as the Andromeda's gambit slipped into the inky void of space. Captain Stephen Hunter stood at the helm, his eyes fixed on the starfield ahead. The stolen data drive from Zephyr's little job burned a hole in his pocket, a beacon of hope and danger all rolled into one. "All right, Lynx," he called over his shoulder. "What have we got?" The ship's enigmatic hacker materialized from the shadows, her fingers dancing over a holographic interface. "Coordinates, Cap. Remote mining colony called Vulcan's Forge. Looks like our ticket to making some real waves." Stephen's lips curled into a grim smile. "Set a course, Jet. Time to stir up some trouble." As the gambit pierced the shimmering veil of hyperspace, Stephen found Fornax in the observation deck, her alien features bathed in the ethereal glow of passing stars. "How you holding up, kid?" he asked, settling in beside her. Fornax turned, her eyes shimmering with a mix of fear and perseverance. "I'm ready, Stephen. Whatever comes next, I want to face it." The captain nodded, a surge of pride and something else, something deeper, coursing through him. Days later, Vulcan's Forge loomed before them, a rust-colored orb scarred by mining operations. As they descended through the hazy atmosphere, the true nature of the colony revealed itself. Squat prefab buildings, huddled beneath towering excavators and processing plants. The air itself seemed to carry the acrid taste of oppression. "Obsidian conglomerate," Gator growled, peering through the view screen. "Nasty bunch of corporate vultures." Stephen's face hardened. "All right, people, we play it cool. Fornax and I will make contact with the rebels. The rest of you, keep your ears to the ground. Something tells me this powder keg's about to blow." The gritty streets of the colony churned with discontent. Miners, human and alien alike, moved with hunched shoulders and wary eyes. Stephen and Fornax wove through the throng, the latter's features hidden beneath a tattered cloak. In a dingy bar on the outskirts of the main settlement, they found their man. Jack's Ironheart Gallows lived up to his name, his face a roadmap of scars and hard-won battles. The miner's eyes narrowed as Stephen slid into the booth across from him. "Well, well," Jax rumbled, "if it ain't the infamous Stray Dog himself, what brings a corsair to our little slice of hell?" Stephen leaned in, his voice low. "Word is you've got a rebellion brewing. We're here to add some fuel to that fire." Jax's laugh was as dry as the forge's dusty plains. "Bold words, Captain. But talk is cheap in these parts. You want in? Prove you're more than just a pretty face and a fancy ship." As Jax laid out his audacious plan to seize the ore processing facility, Fornax felt a thrill of excitement course through her. This was it, a chance to strike back at the very system that had nearly condemned her to a life of servitude. Back on the Gambit, Gator and Doc burst into the common area, their faces grim. "Cap, you're not going to believe this," Gator began, his fists clenched at his sides. Doc picked up the thread, his usually calm demeanor shaken. "The Obsidian conglomerate, they're using forced labor. Talarian refugees sold into bondage by the same warlord who—" He trailed off, his eyes flickering to Fornax. The young alien's face hardened, a fire igniting in her eyes. "I'm going," she declared, her voice brooking no argument. "I know their tech. I can help." Stephen opened his mouth to protest, but the look in Fornax's eyes stopped him cold. He recognized that fire. It was the same one that burned in his own heart. As the corsairs and miners prepared for their daring assault, Stephen found himself drawn to Fornax. In quiet moments between strategy sessions and weapons checks, they gravitated toward each other. A brush of hands here, a lingering glance there. The heat between them built, as palpable as the tension in the colony. The day of reckoning dawned hot and acrid. Stephen stood before his crew and their newfound allies, the ragtag army of miners and outcasts. No rousing speech passed his lips. They all knew what was at stake. With a nod to Jax, the attack began. The rebels surged forward, armed with mining equipment turned to instruments of liberation. Plasma bolts sizzled through the air as Obsidian's guards returned fire. Stephen and Fornax moved as one, years of unspoken understanding condensed into this moment. They ducked and weaved through the chaos, covering each other's blind spots with an almost preternatural awareness. Fornax's fingers flew over the facility's control panel, her intimate knowledge of Talarian tech giving them the edge they needed. Alarms blared and security doors slammed shut, trapping Obsidian's forces and clearing the path for the rebels. The battle raged on, a symphony of desperation and hope. Blood mingled with sweat and oil on the facility's floor. But slowly, inexorably, the tide turned. As the last of Obsidian's guards fell, a ragged cheer went up from the rebel forces. They'd done it. The processing facility, the lifeblood of the colony, was theirs. In the aftermath, as the miners celebrated their hard-won freedom, Stephen found Fornax on a catwalk overlooking the facility. Without a word, he pulled her close, their lips meeting in a kiss that spoke volumes. All the fear, the hope, the unspoken longing, it all poured out in that moment. But their victory was short-lived. Lynx's voice crackled over the comms, urgent and tense. "Cap, we've got a problem. A big one." Stephen's blood ran cold as he listened to the hacker's report. The Talarian warlord had put a price on their heads that would make even the most hardened bounty hunter salivate. As the Andromeda's Gambit prepared for liftoff, Stephen looked out over the liberated colony. They'd struck a blow here, lit a spark that could ignite a galaxy-wide rebellion. But the price of that victory was steep. With a heavy heart and a steely tenacity, he gave the order to depart. As Vulcan's forge receded into the distance, Stephen knew that their real fight was just beginning. The Crimson Corsairs were no longer just outlaws. They were the vanguard of a revolution. And somewhere out there, a Talarian warlord's wrath awaited them. The Andromeda's Gambit shuddered as another volley of plasma fire grazed its hull. Captain Stephen Hunter gripped the helm, his fist clenched as he guided the ship through the treacherous expanse of space. "Jet, I need more speed," he barked, eyes fixed on the swirling mass of gases ahead. "She's giving all she's got, Cap," the pilot responded, his fingers dancing across the controls. "Any more and we'll tear ourselves apart." Stephen gritted his teeth. "It'll have to do. Lynx, status on that nebula?" The hacker's voice crackled over the comms. "Uncharted and unstable. Radiation levels are off the charts. We go in there, we might not come out." "Better than the alternative," Stephen muttered, glancing at the pursuing Obsidian warships on the tactical display. As the Gambit plunged into the roiling clouds of the nebula, visibility dropped to 0. The ship bucked and groaned, battered by unseen currents and pockets of intense radiation. In the common area, Fornax stumbled as another violent tremor rocked the vessel. A strong arm caught her, steadying her against a bulkhead. "Easy there," Gator rumbled, his usually jovial face etched with concern. "Might want to strap in. This ride's about to get a whole lot bumpier." For days, the Gambit drifted through the nebula's hellish interior. Systems failed, life support sputtered, and tempers frayed. In the dark hours between crisis and catastrophe, Stephen found himself drawn to Fornax's quarters. They spoke in hushed tones, sharing fears and hopes, the electric tension between them growing with each stolen moment. On the 4th day, as Stephen and Fornax huddled over star charts in his cabin, proximity alarms blared to life. Obsidian mercenary scouts had found them. "Evasive maneuvers!" Stephen shouted as he sprinted to the bridge. "Gator, get on those guns!" The Gambit twisted and dove, narrowly avoiding the hail of fire from the nimble scout ships. Gator's return volleys found their mark, turning 2 of the attackers into expanding clouds of debris. But the damage was done. As the last scout vanished into the nebula, Stephen slumped in his chair, a cold realization settling in his gut. "They shouldn't have been able to find us," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. "Not in this." Fornax's eyes widened. "You think we have a traitor aboard?" Stephen nodded grimly. "And I think I know who." Hours later, in the cargo hold, Gator and Doc cornered Jet. The pilot's eyes darted between them, his hand inching towards the plasma pistol at his hip. "Easy now," Gator growled. "We just want to talk." "About what?" Jet spat, his voice trembling. Doc stepped forward, his gentle demeanor at odds with the tension in the air. "About why Obsidian always seems to know where we are. About encrypted transmissions sent from the Gambit. About you." Jet's shoulders sagged, the fight draining out of him. "You don't understand. They have my family. My home. I didn't have a choice." As Jet's story spilled out, a larger picture emerged. The Obsidian conglomerate's tendrils reached further than anyone had imagined, its alliance with the Talarian warlord creating a web of corruption and oppression that spanned systems. In the aftermath of Jet's confession, Stephen made a choice that would haunt him. The Gambit, their home and lifeline, had to be abandoned. As the crew prepared to jettison in the ship's sole remaining shuttle, Jet stepped forward. "I'll stay behind," he said, his voice steady. "Give you a fighting chance. It's the least I can do." Stephen clasped the pilot's arm, a silent understanding passing between them. As the shuttle detached from the Gambit, Stephen watched his ship and Jet disappear into the nebula's swirling mist. Days later, battered and resource-starved, the Corsairs limped into the shadowy recesses of Elixir. The ancient alien megastructure loomed before them, a testament to long-forgotten cosmic engineers. As they docked in a cavernous hangar bay, Stephen turned to his crew. "I won't lie to you," he said, his voice low. "What comes next won't be easy, but it's our only shot at staying in this fight." Fornax stepped to his side, her hand finding his in the dim light of the shuttle. "Whatever it takes," she whispered, "we're with you." As they disembarked, a motley crew of pirates and outlaws watched from the shadows. At their center stood a figure Stephen recognized all too well, Zara Blackheart Chen, the most notorious crime lord this side of the galactic core. "Welcome to Elixir," Zara purred, her cybernetic eye glowing an eerie red. "I hear you're in need of sanctuary. Well, my friends, Nothing comes for free in this life. I have a job for you. Something that'll make your little rebellion on Vulcan's Forge look like a bar fight. Steven's hand tightened on his blaster. What kind of job? Zara's smile was sharp enough to cut. Oh, nothing too difficult. Just a little corporate espionage, some larceny, maybe a dash of sabotage. Tell me, Captain, how do you feel about experimental bioweapons? Zara's words hung in the air, heavy with promise and threat. Before Steven could respond, alarms blared throughout Elixir's cavernous docking bay. The crime lord's cybernetic eye pulsed an angry red as she tapped into the outpost's security feed. Looks like your little revolution has caught up with us, she snarled. Warlord's armada incoming. Time to earn your keep, Corsairs. The next hours passed in a blur of frantic preparation. Steven barked orders as the Corsairs and Elixir's denizens fortified choke points and distributed weapons. Fornax's fingers flew over holographic interfaces, bolstering the outpost's aging shield generators. Incoming! Gator's voice boomed over the comms as the first wave of enemy ships breached Elixir's outer perimeter. The outpost shuddered under the barrage, artificial gravity fluctuating wildly. Steven steadied himself against a bulkhead, locking eyes with Fornax. This is it, he said, voice tight. Our stand. They moved as one, racing to plug the gaps in Elixir's faltering defensive line. Plasma fire sizzled through the air as the Warlord's vanguard poured through breached airlocks. Steven's blaster sang, downing foe after foe, but for each that fell, two more took their place. We can't hold them, Jax shouted, his miners fighting with desperate fury beside the Corsairs. We have to, Steven roared back, diving for cover as an explosion rocked the corridor. Fornax's eyes blazed with tenacity. She jacked into a nearby terminal, her newly augmented neural implants interfacing directly with Elixir's systems. I have an idea, she said, her voice distant as she immersed herself in the station's data streams. Suddenly, the Warlord's own weapon emplacements pivoted, turning on their masters. Chaos erupted among the invaders as friendly fire tore through their ranks. Nice work, Steven grinned, squeezing off another shot. Their moment of triumph was short-lived. A figure materialized from the smoke and debris, a man in the tattered remains of an obsidian conglomerate uniform. Wait, he shouted, hands raised. I can help you. Name's Gage. I know this station's secrets. Steven's blaster remained trained on the newcomer. Talk fast. Gage's words spilled out in a rush, detailing hidden systems and fail-safes built into Elixir's alien architecture. But I'll need to get to the control nexus, he finished. It's deep in the sublevels. Steven made a split-second decision. Gator, take Doc and Lynx. Go with him. He turned to Fornax and Jax. We hold the line here. As Gator's team disappeared into Elixir's depths, the battle above intensified. Steven felt the station groan beneath his feet as the Warlord's full might bore down upon them. They were out of time. Fornax, he said, voice grim, can you access Elixir's self-destruct? Her eyes widened in understanding. You can't be serious. It's our only chance to take them out with us. Steven's hand found hers, squeezing tight. Do it. Fornax nodded, interfacing once more with Elixir's systems. Warning klaxons blared as the self-destruct sequence initiated. 10 minutes, she whispered. The next moments passed in a blur of desperate fighting and agonizing waiting. Just as hope began to fade, a shimmering energy field enveloped them. Teleport matrix engaged, Lynx's voice crackled over the comms. Scatter protocol in effect. The world dissolved into blinding light. When Steven's vision cleared, he found himself alone in an unfamiliar ship's hold. The battle of Elixir, nothing more than a rapidly fading nightmare. Light years away, Fornax jolted awake in the Andromeda's Gambit's medbay. Jet's face swam into focus above her. Easy, the pilot said, steadying her. We made it out, but... His voice trailed off. Fornax's heart clenched. Steven? The others? Jet shook his head. Don't know. We're picking up scattered transmissions. Cap's calling for a rendezvous, but... A proximity alarm cut him off. Jet's face paled as he checked the readings. Multiple warp signatures, he breathed. It's the warlord. He found us. Fornax stumbled to her feet, pushing aside the pain and disorientation. As she reached for the ship's controls, one thought burned in her mind. Find Stephen. Survive. The battered Gambit limped forward, carrying the last hope of the rebellion into the unknown. The Andromeda's Gambit shuddered as it plunged into the roiling chaos of the Scar Nebula. Fornax gripped the console, her eyes locked on the sensor readouts as the warlord's ships faded from pursuit. "We've lost them," she breathed, allowing herself a moment of relief before turning to Jet. "Any word from the others?" The pilot shook his head, his face drawn with exhaustion. "Nothing clear, just fragments of... Wait." He leaned forward, adjusting the comm frequencies. "I've got something." A burst of static filled the bridge, punctuated by a familiar voice. "Unter... Gator... Need... Extraction..." Fornax's heart leapt. "Stephen! It's Stephen and Gator!" Jet's fingers flew over the controls, isolating the signal. "Coordinates coming through. It's a terrestrial moon, not far." "Set a course," Fornax ordered, her voice steady despite the turmoil in her chest. "We're going in." The Gambit emerged from the nebula's swirling clouds, revealing a desolate gray orb hanging in the void. As they approached, Fornax's enhanced vision picked out a twisted metal shape on the surface, an escape pod. "There," she pointed, "but something's wrong. The surface..." The moon's landscape writhed and shifted, as if alive. Grotesque forms emerged from irradiated craters, shambling towards the pod. Jet swore under his breath. The mutagenic payload, it must have contaminated the area. They touched down 100 meters from the pod, the ship's landing struts sinking into the unstable ground. Fornax and Jet donned environment suits, weapons at the ready. "Stay sharp," Fornax warned as the airlock cycled open. They sprinted across the lunar surface, dodging grasping tendrils of mutated flora. The pod's hatch hung open, revealing two motionless forms within. "Stephen!" Fornax called, her heart in her throat as she reached for him. The captain's eyes fluttered open, unfocused. "Fornax? You came..." Gator stirred beside him, his massive frame barely fitting in the cramped pod. "'Bout time," he grunted through gritted teeth. As Fornax and Jet worked to extract their injured comrades, a horrific screech split the air. They turned to see a horde of twisted creatures advancing, former indigenous life warped beyond recognition by the mutagenic agent. "Move!" Fornax shouted, firing her plasma rifle into the approaching mass. They half-carried, half-dragged Stephen and Gator back to the Gambit, the creatures hot on their heels. Jet slammed the airlock controls as tentacles and claws scrabbled at the hull. "Get us out of here!" Fornax yelled as she secured Stephen and Gator in the medbay. The ship lurched skyward, breaking free of the moon's turbulent atmosphere, but their vector had been compromised in the hasty escape. "We're locked into a new trajectory," Jet reported grimly, "and you're not going to like where it's taking us." A holographic star map flickered to life, revealing their course straight into the heart of obsidian conglomerate territory. Fornax's mind raced. The shipyard's orbiting Tartarus. It's our only shot. Stephen, barely conscious, managed a weak nod. "Do it." As they approached the heavily fortified industrial colony, Fornax interfaced directly with the Gambit systems. Her neural enhancements sang as she probed Tartarus Station's defenses, seeking vulnerabilities. "I've got a back door," she announced, "but it won't last long." The Gambit slipped past the outer defense grid, docking in a shadowy recess of the sprawling shipyards. They disembarked cautiously, Stephen and Gator providing tactical guidance despite their injuries. "Wait!" Stephen hissed suddenly, pulling them back into cover. "I know that face." A figure strode past their hiding spot, a man with a cybernetic eye and a cruel sneer. Fornax's blood ran cold as recognition hit her. "Drakkar Caney," she whispered. The crime lord's head snapped towards them, his augmented vision piercing the shadows. "Well, well," he drawled, "if it isn't the infamous Crimson Corsairs. Guards!" Alarms blared as the rebels sprinted through the shipyards, dodging plasma fire and searching desperately for an escape route. They rounded a corner and collided with a familiar face. "Gage!" Fornax gasped, recognizing the former Obsidian operative from Elixir. "This way," Gage urged, leading them towards a sleek vessel unlike any they'd seen before. "Prototype stealth frigate, your ticket out of here." As they raced up the boarding ramp, a figure materialized from thin air beside the ship's airlock. Fornax raised her weapon, then froze in shock. "Lynx?" The hacker grinned, her hands flying over a hollow interface. "Miss me? Now get aboard. I've left Obsidian a little going-away present." The frigate's engines roared to life as they strapped in. Through the view screen, they watched Tartarus Station's systems flicker and fail, crippled by Lynx's virus. "Where to, Captain?" Jet asked as they cleared the shipyards. Stephen leaned forward, his eyes blazing with renewed purpose. "The edge of known space. It's time we took this fight to Obsidian." As the stolen frigate vanished into the starfield, the first reports of uprisings across a dozen worlds began to trickle in. The spark of rebellion had ignited an inferno. "Galaxy." Stephen's eyes gleamed as he processed the incoming data. "Reports of uprisings on a dozen worlds," he announced, his voice tight with scarcely controlled excitement. "Lynx's virus did more than cripple Tartarus Station. It sparked a rebellion." Fornax's fingers danced over the stolen frigate's controls, her neural enhancements interfacing seamlessly with the advanced systems. "We should name her," she said, a rare smile playing across her lips. "How about Crimson Renegade?" Stephen nodded approvingly. "Fitting. Now let's see what this prototype can do." The newly christened Crimson Renegade sliced through space, its stealth systems rendering it virtually invisible to long-range scanners. As they pushed deeper into uncharted territory, a coded transmission crackled through the comms. Lynx's eyes widened as she decrypted the message. "It's an invitation. A summit of rebel cells on the edge of the Erebus system." "Erebus?" Jax growled, his face twisting with concern. "That's the ass end of nowhere. Could be a trap." Stephen considered for a moment, then set his jaw. "It's a risk we have to take. If there's a chance to unite the scattered resistance, we owe it to everyone we've lost to try." The Crimson Renegade emerged from hyperspace on the fringes of the Erebus system. A patchwork fleet of mismatched ships hung in the void, converted freighters, decommissioned warships, and cobbled-together attack craft. At their center floated a massive, hollowed-out asteroid that served as the rebellion's makeshift base. As they docked, Stephen addressed his crew. "Stay alert. We don't know these people or their motivations. Trust no one completely." The asteroid's cavernous meeting hall buzzed with activity. Representatives from a dozen rebel factions argued strategy and shared intel. Stephen's gaze swept the room, cataloging potential allies and threats. A hush fell over the crowd as Fornax stepped forward, her alien features drawing curious and sometimes hostile stares. She linked with the central holoprojector, streams of data flooding her consciousness. "I've decrypted transmissions from Obsidian's secure channels," she announced, her voice steady despite the weight of the information. "They speak of a contingency plan called Tartarus Strain." Gasps and murmurs rippled through the assembled rebels. Gage, the former Obsidian operative, pushed his way to the front. "I've heard whispers," he said, his face grim. "It was meant to be a terraforming agent, a way to rapidly alter hostile environments for colonization. But rogue elements within Obsidian have weaponized it. They plan to unleash it on civilian populations that resist their rule." The room erupted in shouts of outrage and fear. Stephen raised his voice above the din. "We can't let that happen. The Crimson Corsairs volunteer to infiltrate the lab and neutralize this threat." As the summit broke into planning sessions, Stephen found a quiet corner with Fornax. He took her hand, his touch gentle despite the calluses earned from years of combat. "You were incredible in there," he said softly. "I don't know what I'd do without you." Fornax's luminescent eyes met his. "Stephen, A commotion interrupted their moment. Jack stood nearby, his face contorted with disgust. "Figures," he spat. "The aliens got you wrapped around her finger. How do we know she ain't working for the enemy?" Stephen's hand flew to his blaster, but Fornax caught his arm. "He's not worth it," she whispered. Listen here, you bigoted piece of shit, Steven snarled, stepping into Jax's space. Fornax has saved all our asses more times than I can count. Her alien heritage is what's giving us a fighting chance. So stow that speciesist garbage, or you can find yourself another crew. Jax's eyes darted between them before he skulked away, muttering under his breath. Steven turned back to Fornax, his expression softening. I'm sorry about that. You deserve better. She squeezed his hand. Thank you for standing up for me. It means more than you know. Their moment was cut short as alarms blared throughout the asteroid base. Obsidian ships incoming, a voice shouted over the comms. All teams, prepare for immediate deployment. Steven and Fornax raced for the Crimson Renegade, adrenaline surging. As they strapped in, Steven's voice rang out clear and determined. Set course for Valkyr's Bane, he ordered. It's time to end this Tartarus strain threat once and for all. The Renegade's engines flared to life, carrying them towards a confrontation that would shape the destiny of the universe. The Crimson Renegade screamed through hyperspace, its hull still bearing scorch marks from the desperate battle against Obsidian's forces at Valkyr's Bane. Inside, the mood was somber as the crew processed their victory and its terrible cost. Fornax stood alone in the ship's small memorial chamber, her luminescent eyes fixed on the holographic portraits of Gator and Doc. She traced her fingers over Gator's gruff features, remembering the Ursoid's booming laugh and unwavering loyalty. Beside him, Doc's kind eyes seemed to peer into her soul, a silent reminder of all they had sacrificed. I'm sorry, she whispered, her voice catching. We did it, but the price was too high. A hand gently touched her shoulder. Steven had entered silently, his own grief etched in the lines of his face. They knew the risks, he said softly, and they'd be proud of what we accomplished. Fornax nodded, allowing herself to lean into his embrace for a moment before straightening. The Tartarus strain is neutralized. What's our next move? Before Steven could answer, Lynx's voice crackled over the ship's comms. Captain, we're receiving a coded transmission. You're going to want to see this. They hurried to the bridge where Lynx's fingers danced over hollow interfaces. It's encrypted 6 ways from Sunday, she explained, but the source claims to have intel on something called the Nexus Citadel. Jet's eyes widened. The mobile fortress? I thought that was just a myth to scare recruits. Apparently not, Steven said grimly. What else? Lynx's face was illuminated by scrolling data. It's more than just Obsidian's military HQ. There's a xenological research vault on board, housing alien relics of immense power. The bridge fell silent as the implications sank in. Jax was the first to speak, his voice tight with anger. We can't let those corporate bastards keep that kind of firepower. Agreed, Steven nodded. Lynx, work with Rebel intelligence to verify this intel. If it checks out, we're going in. Hours later, the core team gathered in the Renegade's war room. Hollow projections of the Nexus Citadel schematics rotated slowly above the table. Our mysterious benefactor has given us a way in, Steven explained. We'll insert during a shipment transfer, posing as cargo handlers. Gage studied the plans, his cybernetic eye whirring as it processed the data. Security will be tight. We'll need to move fast and quiet. That's where I come in, Lynx grinned, cracking her knuckles. I'll run interference, keeping their systems occupied while you do the heavy lifting. Steven nodded. Fornax, Jet, Jax, Gage, you're with me on the ground team. We get in, secure those relics, and get out before they know what hit them. As the others filed out to prepare, Fornax lingered. Steven, she said softly, are you sure about this? If this intel is a trap... He met her gaze, his eyebrows furrowed. It's a risk we have to take. Those relics could turn the tide of this war. Fornax nodded, pushing down her unease. Then let's go steal ourselves an alien superweapon. The Crimson Renegade slipped through the vastness of space, its stealth systems masking its approach to the massive, gleaming fortress that was the Nexus Citadel. As they neared their insertion point, Steven addressed his team one last time. Remember, he said, his voice steady, we're in and out. No unnecessary risks. The fate of the rebellion rides on this mission. With a hiss of depressurization, the airlock opened and the strike team stepped into the unknown. Cavernous belly of the Nexus Citadel. The team moved swiftly through dimly lit corridors, their footsteps muffled by the constant hum of machinery. "Link, status report," Stephen whispered into his comm. "Systems are engaged," came the hacker's reply. "You've got about 10 minutes before they notice the anomalies." As they approached the Xenological Research Vault, alarms suddenly blared. Red emergency lights bathed the corridor in an eerie glow. "Shit," Jax cursed. "They're onto us!" "No time for stealth," Stephen ordered. "Weapons hot. We take that vault now." Plasma bolts sizzled past as Obsidian security forces poured into the corridor. Fornax's alien reflexes allowed her to dance between the shots, her own weapons singing a deadly chorus. Jet and Gage provided covering fire, while Stephen led the charge. They breached the vault's outer defenses, but Stephen's blood ran cold as he saw what awaited them inside. A group of Obsidian scientists huddled around a pulsing alien artifact, its surface writhing with unknowable energies. "By the stars," Fornax breathed. "That's it, the superweapon." Before they could secure it, a familiar face stepped out from behind the artifact. Oligarch Silas Charn, his cybernetic implants glowing with malice. "Did you really think we'd leave such power unguarded?" Charn sneered. Stephen's mind raced. This was more than a simple heist now. The fate of the entire rebellion hung in the balance. "Fornax," he said quietly. "Plan Omega, are you ready?" The alien's luminescent eyes met his, understanding passing between them. She nodded once, her fingers already dancing across her neural interface. In that moment, everything changed. The stolen alien superweapon hummed to life, its energy coursing through the Citadel's systems. Fornax's voice rang out, not just in the vault, but across every Obsidian communication channel. "Attention, citizens of Obsidian-controlled worlds. We are the voice of the rebellion. We have seized control of a weapon capable of unimaginable destruction, but unlike our oppressors, we choose not to use it." Charn's face contorted with rage. "You fool! Do you think empty threats will—" His words were cut short as Fornax's virus crippled the Citadel's systems. Screens flickered to life, broadcasting the true face of Obsidian's tyranny across 1,000 worlds. "We demand an end to Obsidian's rule," Stephen continued, his voice steady despite the chaos erupting around them. "We call for self-governance of all colonies. Yield now or face the consequences of your own corruption laid bare for all to see." As if in answer to their ultimatum, a private channel crackled to life. A woman's voice, tight with urgency, came through. "This is Oligarch Miriam Avia. I can help you, but you must extract me immediately. Charn plans to activate Apocalypse Reign. He'll destroy everything rather than lose control." Stephen's eyes widened. This changed everything. He turned to his team, perseverance etched on his face. "New objective," he said. "We find Avia and stop Apocalypse Reign. Move out." The Crimson Corsairs fought their way deeper into the heart of the Nexus Citadel, the fate of countless worlds hanging in the balance. The Crimson Corsairs fought their way deeper into the heart of the Nexus Citadel, alarms blaring and emergency lights casting eerie shadows. Plasma bolts sizzled past as they pushed forward, their mission now twofold: extract Oligarch Miriam Avia and stop the activation of Apocalypse Reign. Stephen led the charge, his face set in unyielding commitment. "Fornax, can you pinpoint Avia's location?" The alien's fingers danced across her neural interface. "Got her. 2 levels down, south quadrant." They battled through waves of Obsidian security forces, the air thick with ozone and the acrid smell of melted plasteel. Jet's heavy repeater carved a path through the enemy ranks, while Gage's cybernetic enhancements allowed him to hack defensive systems on the fly. As they neared Avia's position, a massive explosion rocked the Citadel. Klaxons wailed, and a computerized voice intoned, "Warning! Apocalypse Reign protocols initiated. All personnel evacuate immediately." "We're out of time," Stephen growled. "Jax, Gage, find that failsafe and shut it down. Fornax with me." They split up, racing against the clock. Stephen and Fornax burst into a high-security chamber, to find oligarch Avia frantically working at a console. "About time," she snapped, not looking up. "Charn's gone mad. He's willing to sacrifice everything." Before they could respond, the far wall exploded inward. Through the debris stepped Silas Charn himself, his cybernetic implants pulsing with malevolent energy. "You're too late," he snarled. "Apocalypse Rain will cleanse this corrupt galaxy, and from its ashes I will forge a new order." Stephen raised his weapon, but Charn was faster. A blast of concentrated energy struck the captain square in the chest, hurling him across the room. "Stephen!" Fornax cried out, her alien features contorted with anguish. As Charn advanced, Fornax's grief transmuted into rage. Her neural interface blazed with power, tapping into the Citadel's systems. Streams of data flooded her consciousness, and she turned them into a weapon. The room's defenses came to life, targeting Charn. He roared in frustration as energy fields trapped him. His own creations turned against him. Fornax rushed to Stephen's side. His breath came in ragged gasps, but his eyes were clear. "The broadcast," he whispered. "Show them the truth." Understanding dawned. Fornax linked with the Citadel's communication array, bypassing firewalls and security protocols. In an instant, every screen across 1,000 worlds flickered to life. "Citizens of the galaxy," Fornax's voice rang out, steady despite the chaos around her. "Witness the true face of Obsidian's tyranny." Images flooded the airwaves, proof of planned genocides, of worlds stripped bare for profit, of the Tartarus strain and other atrocities. And at the center of it all, Silas Charn's mad vision of galactic cleansing. As the truth spread like wildfire, Stephen's eyes met Fornax's. A lifetime of unspoken words passed between them in that moment. Then, with a final, shuddering breath, he was gone. Fornax allowed herself one heartbeat of grief before steeling herself for what came next. She turned to face Charn, still trapped but seething with hatred. "Your regime ends today," she declared. "But this isn't over. Something worse is coming, a horror of your own making." As if summoned by her words, the Citadel shuddered. Through the breach in the wall, Fornax caught a glimpse of something vast and impossible, a sentient singularity birthed from forbidden xenotech. The Oblivion engine had awakened, and the true battle for the galaxy's survival was about to begin.
You have reached the end of the story. If you enjoyed this story and want to support us, please leave a like and subscribe to our channel, and for every comment that says 88, I will heart every single one of them. Thank you for your time.